What's up, everybody? It's a new week, so you know what that means. There is a new NBA draft profile on this channel. It's JJ Buckets. I've told you what we're doing today, and as I'm sure you can tell from the thumbnail, but in case you don't know, we're doing Ron Holland today. Before I hop into things, usual drill, just make sure you are leaving a like on the video. You know it goes a long way, helps the algorithm out a ton. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Plus, if you plan on doing any responsible sports betting in the near future, just make sure to check out my link in the description below. So the pros of Ron Holland's game are kind of interesting to talk about because they kind of all build within each other, kind of build into themselves. I'm not sure if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense, but I think by the time I'm finished talking about this section, it most definitely will make sense. So, Ron Holland, I think the first thing that absolutely pops off the screen for you when you put on the tape of Ron Holland is his motor. Now, some of you might be sitting there and thinking, it's like, God, if the motor is the first thing that you can talk about with a player, like, is he really that good of a player? Well, jury's still out on that one at the NBA level at the very least. But when it comes to the G League and just his previous play, obviously like with high school ball and all that other such, you throw on tape of Ron Holland, you see a guy that is 150 kilometers an hour, like non-stop at every single point of the game. Every single point might be a little bit of an over-exaggeration, but honestly, it might not be, and that's kind of how it feels with Ron Holland sometimes. This guy is always working, both on the defensive end and on the offensive end. There's no let-up to his game, and it really does go into the rest of his game and the rest of his positives, and I'll explain how so. Offensively, that high motor helps contribute to the fact that this guy, you can make an argument, he's the best slasher in the draft. Like, he is just one of the best attackers of the basket that you'll see in this year's class. Now, I've talked about Nikola Topic in a previous profile, and I really liked his slashing ability. Ron Holland, similarly to Topic, well, not necessarily in the way that they can finish, but just they're both very elite at finishing around the basket. Ron Holland does it a little bit differently in the sense that, you know, he's definitely somebody that's strong. You see the presence of his length and wingspan, and he takes advantage of that so damn well. And again, like, he bowls his way into there. Like, he's got a good first step. He is very effective getting to the basket, controlling his body, and getting a finish. He does not shy away from contact in the slightest. He is as aggressive as that motor allows him to be, and let me tell you, that motor allows him to be really aggressive. Speaking of aggressiveness, on the defensive end, he is a very exciting prospect. I think you can make an argument Ron Holland is the most versatile defender in this year's draft. Definitely somebody that you can see guarding multiple positions at the NBA level. Like, you could probably stick this guy like, I always get maybe a little overzealous with these, but like 1 through 4, honestly, maybe some 5s, emphasis on some, but at the very least, like 1 through 4, like, this guy's a very versatile defender. He's also really good, once again, bring that motor back into things here. Like, he's very good at jumping passing lanes, really anticipating that through his good overall team defense and some good IQ when it comes to like rotations, and he takes advantage of that, and he'll, you know, jump that passing lane, create that turnover, and he is very good at taking that and turning defense into offense. You can definitely make the argument that he is the best player in this year's draft at just attacking in the open court and just being a threat in that kind of up-tempo style offense where like you want to be running. So if you're a team that plays an up-tempo pace, he's gonna fit in like a glove with you, because yeah, like, as soon as he sees open court, you can pretty much either count those 2 points or send him into the line, quite frankly. But regardless, again, like, the high motor is his main selling point, I think, of Ron Holland, and it contributes both on the offensive end and on the defensive end in terms of just some of the things that he is best at on the basketball court. When it comes to Ron Holland's game, the negatives aren't that hard to find either. And what I think is funny is the overarching theme of the prospects that I've covered. And this one just keeps coming up with every single one. Not a good shooter. unfortunately. At the very least, like 3-point shooting wise, there is a lot of work to be done. Now, he does show some promise. There are times where he can look a little streaky in a good way, and there are times where like he is knocking down those shots. I think like the arc on his shooting is not that bad. Like there's room to believe that it could get there one day, but he's definitely gonna need to be coached up as a shooter right now. I mean, he's just not cutting it. I'm sure you saw the graphic of his G League stats at 24%, and I mean, that's an ugly number. That's an ugly number. Let's not pretend that it isn't. So Ron Holland will definitely need that 3-ball, especially given the archetype of player that he is. I think a 3-ball makes such a massive difference for him at the NBA level that if he connects on that 3-ball and that starts dropping for him regularly, like, God, like imagine the slashing ability that he has and a threat from the outside that you need to respect. Like, it'll make a difference. It'll make a big difference. I think something else that's really gonna make a difference for him as well is cutting down on the turnovers. 2.9 turnovers a game is ugly, especially ugly when you're comparing it to, you know, his 3 assists per game, which that's a terrible assist to turnover ratio. I'll say that much. Like we've talked about obviously his high motor, and while I think that's definitely one of his biggest strengths, sometimes it can also lend itself to him being a turnover prone player. Sometimes he just needs to have a little bit more control with his game and not burrow into areas where there's multiple defenders and he's gonna be forced into bad passes and bad turnovers. I think that's just the case with his game sometimes. So like that's something that he will really need to get a handle on. And quite frankly, speaking of his handle, should he polish that up as well, that will definitely lend itself to him cutting down these turnovers too. Like those, like that is gonna need cleaning up at the NBA level. But I think that is a relatively fixable issue. So it's not, I guess, the scariest thing to look at when it comes to a prospect, but still definitely is something worth noting. And here is the funny thing, that if we're talking specifically Raptors related and we're talking Ron Holland, I struggle to look at this guy and not see a little bit, at the very least, of RJ Barrett. Now, I really kind of try to shy away from like direct player comparisons sometimes, because sometimes I feel like it creates unrealistic archetypes and expectations that you expect these guys to fall into, and like you don't want to be calling somebody like the next LeBron James, you know, like cough cough, like Ben Simmons or something, and then when they don't live up to those expectations, like they naturally become busts and stuff like that. Not to say that Simmons was a bust or wasn't a bust, that's a different conversation, but I think you get what I'm saying. I don't necessarily like player comps too much. However, at the very least, you can look at RJ side by side, you can look at Ron Holland side by side, and you can see a similar play style that those two guys have. Just with what they do offensively. I think defensively, you could argue which one's better. That's an interesting conversation, I think, actually. But in terms of offensive skill sets right now, they are quite similar. And if you're the Raptors, how do you feel about that is a very, I think, important question to be considering when looking at Ron Holland. All right, what do you folks think? Ron Holland is the second of the G League prospects that I've covered here. Obviously, I've already done Matas Buzelis, and rest assured, for the couple of you that have asked for Tyler Smith, that video is on the way. He is on the list of guys that I want to cover. But yeah, it'll be interesting actually next season, should the Raptors be in a similar position and the G League Ignite is obviously going to get disbanded. So this won't be a thing. This is actually the last year that, yeah, this kind of situation is going to happen. Yeah, just, I guess, something weird to think about. But yeah, folks, let me know what you think about Holland, and as usual, if you have any other prospects you want to see me cover, and guys in particular I would say that people haven't already mentioned, or even guys that have been mentioned, like, drop it all in the comment section below. Other than that, folks, end of the video, so usual drill. If you're still watching the video, thank you, first of all, and second of all, hit that like button. It really helps me out a ton when you do it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here and you're enjoying this stuff, because I certainly am. And yeah, other than that, folks, it's been JJ Buckets. It has been an absolute pleasure as always, and I will see everybody next time.